Please note, we would like to make it very clear, we are totally against the form of discipline described in the articles and accounts being used on minors and non-consenting adults. Although some of these accounts are fictional, and others may be an exaggerated reality, none of them are too far from the truth of what really happened back in those days. If you are enjoying our stories, please do subscribe to this channel. We will be posting many more stories as time goes by. My mother developed multiple sclerosis, leaving her in a wheelchair when I was just 3 years old. This placed many extra burdens on my father, including that of smacking my bottom when my parents thought it necessary. These were never terribly brutal events. I was generally put over his knee and had the seat of my trousers dusted a bit with his hand. But when I was 7, our little world was again turned upside down when my dad, a traveling sales rep, was killed in a road accident. Although I was old enough to help a little around the house now, there was so much that mother had to rely on others for, in particular our next-door neighbor, Aunty Pat. People of a certain age will remember how we children were taught to call adult family friends auntie and uncle. For a while after the tragedy, discipline was probably the least of Mum's concerns, and I got away with murder for many a month until the issue finally became unavoidable. Mum was clearly in no fit state to administer corporal punishment herself, yet she wholeheartedly believed that I needed it. So it was arranged that when I was a naughty boy, I would be sent round to Aunty Pat, who would give me a well-smacked bottom instead. Some of you who were more spirited children will wonder at how I went so meekly for these smackings. But although I could be as naughty and disobedient as the next youngster, at heart I was a sensitive little boy who loved his mum. When I transgressed, I was much more upset and ashamed about having been naughty enough to deserve corporal punishment than I was about the spanking itself. That's not to say these encounters didn't hurt, of course. Aunty Pat was a large, muscular woman as she worked as a cleaner, so was accustomed to manual labor with short, very curly hair. She had 3 daughters of her own, all older than me. A good smacked bottom was the standard remedy for naughty children back in 1970s Britain, and I often heard Aunty Pat disciplining the girls, the unmistakable sound of a child crying and bare buttocks being slapped drifting through open windows. The routine for me was always the same. When I misbehaved, Mum would phone up Aunty Pat and would relay details of my latest misdemeanor. My head would be hung in shame, and my face blushing, as she told Aunty Pat exactly what her little boy had done naughty. Then there would be one of 2 outcomes. Normally, Aunty Pat would tell Mum to send me straight round. This was awful, but at least got the punishment over with. However, on some occasions, Aunty Pat would be about to go out to work or go shopping, etc. In this case, she would name a time for Mum to send me round. Mum would usually send me to my room until then, and I would spend the next few hours with a knot in my stomach, anticipating what was going to happen to my bum. Whenever the time came, I would walk very slowly down our driveway and up Aunty Pat's to her back door. I would knock, and she would open the door with a stern look on her face. Generally, she would say something like, "Who's been a naughty boy, then?" or "I believe someone needs his bottom smacking," and I would be ushered into the house. The back door led straight into Aunty Pat's kitchen, where she did all her smacking, and mine at least. I think the girls were often punished in their rooms, ready for bed immediately afterwards. I, by contrast, had to face the walk of shame back to my house, with a tear-stained face and holding my freshly smacked bottom. On these occasions, Aunty Pat would invariably be wearing a flowery housework apron, or occasionally a nylon housecoat in a blue check pattern. She would draw a kitchen chair out from the table, sit down on it, and order me to stand next to her. She didn't waste words on a lecture. She knew my mum would have already said what she had to say on the subject. Instead, she quickly put me over her knee in a time-honored fashion. Aunty Pat never used an implement, but she could smack bottoms for England. Her work-hardened hand stung like a wasp's nest against my bottom, and the smacking lasted a good long time, too. I was usually over her knee for at least 5 minutes. I would have a good cry afterwards, and Aunty Pat would cuddle me while I stood in front of her, until I'd calmed down enough to be sent home. The one mercy was that the girls were never present when I was smacked. I presume Aunty Pat must have ordered them to give us privacy. But they still knew whenever I had my bottom tanned, and teased me about it sometimes too. When I got home, I would normally be sent to bed for an hour or so to think about my behavior. Although they hurt a great deal, Aunty Pat's smackings did me a lot of good. I became much better behaved, and a real help to my mum as she increasingly struggled with her illness. I loved Aunty Pat very much, despite her hard hand, and was devastated when she died, quite young, from cancer.